How's it going, everybody? My name is DuShaun Williams. This is Gaming Over 30. We're here to talk with some devs and have kind of a casual conversation and see if we can find some other gamers over 30 or gamers who just feel like they kind of been in the game for a little bit and have a lot to say. I am here with Tim Ennis.
That's right, Tim. How you doing?
How are you doing?
I'm good. I love being here. I love doing what I do. Got a crazy background. Love to talk about it. Some people don't know the stories. There's a lot of things to say.
Well, there is one question I do want to ask you right off the get-go, and hopefully it's not a self-report or a call-out.
Right.
What was the last game you played?
Last game I played, I love Skyrim. I gotta say I'm a little bit of a nut when it comes to fantasy, RPG. They did so many things right. It's even when you're not even gaming, just the mood sitting on a snow-top mountain, right? You got the wind and the audio. I'm an old school D&D player, coming from way back. So that has a special place in my heart. Yeah, I think some of the stuff that I touch is usually like the really old favorites. When I was working in games, I would play what I'm paid to work on, and I would play the competitors. So my perspective is I could play a billion games, well, maybe not a billion, but you could try to touch every game in the market if that's what you were trying to keep in touch with. But for me, I would be paid, and I would take that and I would go, what is the competitor for this product? What can I learn from the competitor of this product? And then I would play that product, and I would take notes, and I would try to figure out, with the game that I'm making, does this game do something better? And so a lot of my work was around, when I'm doing something, what is my competition? So I would touch those first.
And you kind of gave me a description, but can you kind of the title to go with that description? Kind of get me interested in kind of the competitive aspect of it.
Well, when you're an entrepreneur and a producer, you kind of come from at a bunch of different angles, right? So there's creative producers, there's business. I think from my perspective, I started off sort of trying to get into games before there was degrees in games. So I got a degree in film, and that was because they didn't have degrees in games.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be sort of the Alfred Hitchcock of games. And I figured I could do it because I had all this pent-up creativity. I had a really incredible understanding of role-playing games, and I was active, constantly writing games, running games, going to conventions, doing tournaments, hosting games. And so from my perspective, a lot of the work that I did kind of led towards writing, designing, but then because I didn't have a computer science degree, I ended up getting into quality assurance, and I spent a lot of time as a QA guy. That's kind of where I spent most of my time. So if we were doing QA, we'd work on certain titles, we would play some other titles, obviously, if it's Duke Nukem or something like Quake and it comes out, you're gonna have to check it out, right?
Yeah.
Tribes, whatever it may be, right? So you go check out the latest thing, and you're playing the one you're being paid for. You work on the one you're being paid for. How much time do you have when you're working 10, 12 crazy amounts of hours a day? Can you really spend time doing what you love, right?
So let me capture that right there, because one of the things that I hope to kind of learn from all this is a lot of people who have gone into games, but kind of was it really like the love of game that really kind of got you into it? But also as a dev, and this will be kind of like a part two, has game dev kind of taken away from you being able to enjoy games?
So that's like film, right? When you learn critical analysis of films, you have to then realize you learned it, and you have to step back. Like I cannot watch certain movies and emotionally invest in it because I analyze it. So you get a critical eye, you develop skills. You start saying, oh, camera, cut. You learn in film school, every time there's an edit, you say cut out loud so you can track when the editing's happening. When you hear something that's super emotional, turn off the audio. Look at the visual. How is the visual working without the audio? You can then learn about what the audio contributes to the editing of the video. So when you get into watching games and playing games, it sort of kills your ability to truly immerse yourself in the system, which is why sometimes I like to just have a game with, like I'm saying, the wind and the snow and the distant sounds, because it's almost like an escape at that moment, because I'm not analyzing anymore. I'm just relaxing and I'm immersed in this moment, right?
It is funny because like I had taken intro to motion pictures when I happened to go to college and stuff. And it was a side like class. Like I wasn't really thinking a lot about it, but it went so much into detail in a lot of movies and stuff. It's kind of like you said, kind of once you get some knowledge, once you kind of dive into it, you kind of just get this scope, this glass on top of your eyes now, and you just kind of view things in a different way. You're kind of now your eyes are like, well, let me catch that. How many cuts did it do to the scene? When did we feel like it cut to another scene? And like all this is kind of running in your head. So you're saying that you kind of also going to do this for games as well. Like you look at some games.
You detach.
Yeah.
You detach. And that's a skill set. And I think it's a super important skill set in QA, right? Because it's one thing to be immersive and just say, I really like that. It's another thing to detach and say, I like that because.
You have been able to still kind of enjoy games in some capacity.
Yeah.
It's just, there are some times where you're like, oh, I have to also kind of separate in some kind of fashion.
So I don't gamble.
Yeah, I don't really...
I'm just saying.
Not in a gaming aspect. Right?
As a person who loves games, and I would spend 16 hours a day gaming if I could.
Yeah.
I know my limits. I know things that I'm into. And one of the things that becomes potentially addictive is getting into something really, really good. And I look for those things that really move me. So if I want to really be excited, really get into something deep, I see a game and I just go, oh my God. Like I've had moments in my life where I can't get out of my chair.
Yeah.
Right? And you realize that somebody did something amazing. But as soon as you realize someone did something amazing, if you're a game dev or someone trying to really be professional in the business, you've got to take a step back and you got to say, what just happened? Stop the presses. Let me write something down because I just learned something, you know? And that's kind of breaks the immersion, but then you can learn some. And that's always been kind of how I operate is that, yeah, I'll get misty-eyed, I'll get super excited, I'll freak out, but I have to then kind of stop every once in a while and say, what just happened? And that's kind of a trick because you may love your stuff so much. When it's so immersive and so good, you get pulled in and there's no analysis. Yeah. You're just pulled in.
Now that you kind of bring Skyrim, and say you like to play a lot of the older stuff, and this is my assumption, but you probably don't touch a lot of like the newer stuff, like gacha games and stuff, maybe because of the gambling aspect of stuff. Had you had the chance to kind of introduce yourself into like newer games, kind of like, you know, the Fortnites and Battle Royale, or kind of like the mobile games that are now just kind of on the constant?
Yeah. One of the things is there are new games that get me interested. And there's like things that show up and you start paying attention to. So like, it's funny, ever since I got kids, they're like my research unit. They go out, they find the cool games, and then I start looking at what they're playing, and then I look at what they're playing. I play it until I sort of get it, and then I put it down. So I don't have the time to play every game, but if you have people who can say this, you know, this is my unofficial review. I really like this game. This game's really cool. Then what you can do is you can actually kind of strategically spend a little bit of time. You know, the older we get, right, the less time we have that we can just sit down and game. And that's just, I hate to break it to everybody. That's just the reality.
This is something that we definitely talked about in length on the show. And I think your story is very similar to my co-host Christopher Makata's. And, you know, a lot of times it's not like he lives like gaming, you know, through his son, but he also kind of, you know, looks at the things that he does. You know, maybe he might play with him and his friends and stuff. So he gets introduced to some games, and sometimes his son kind of works with him and be like, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? And is this, you know, this might be a good game, or kind of, you know, it kind of breaks into it. And it's so interesting when I talk to someone who has kids and stuff, and they can still have gaming part of their life, but also part of like their household, because I feel like sometimes gaming has a hard time kind of getting into stuff.
It's always had a little bit of a stigma. I mean, I lived through the D&D Satanic Panic. You may have heard of that. And there are people who believe that because the books came out and they had, so old school again, Dungeons and Dragons first edition, if you end up with someone who shows you the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is an Afridi on the front. Now, Afridi is not the devil, but he's got horns, he's red, and he looks like super evil. So people are like, they're printing books with the devil, right? And so they freak out. In my mind, that was one of the rule manuals for life. If you wanted to be a game designer or a developer, A long time ago, they created a system that encompasses anything you can create in your mind, and there's a rule set for it. When I look at stuff like that, that's like the foundation of like where we start in talking about game development, because Monopoly, sure, chess goes way back, right? So you have all these origin games that help create the foundation of game mechanics. But then as new games come out, they're building on it, right? They're taking new pieces. So you can actually look at a brand new game and say, everything is the same except for these little things that they did over here and these little things over here. And when you get a critical eye and you don't just unplug, immerse yourself, enjoy it, but you get critical eyed like a film critic would, then what you end up having is a ability to deconstruct a complex system into mechanics, right? And those mechanics can be then deconstructed into methods in which any game is using something to create either a narrative or an emotion or curiosity, exploration, whatever mechanic you're capturing, right? And so part of the key from my perspective is I could play lots of fun things just for me, and I do.
Yeah.
But to play things for purposes of business, which I want to be a professional,
yes,
then I try to be more strategic about how I use my time, because there really is a finite amount of time, and I want to learn, I want to grow, and I want to have an ability to communicate to someone like you. So I may not be able to know the name drop of whatever game you just had, but we could talk about the mechanics of it and how those mechanics work. And then I would effectively start to understand, because we have a common language of how it works. Just like D&D created the basis of role-playing games and all these mechanics that are adopted by all these other games. And again, chess, Go, created all these mechanics that all these other games have used in history. Just like Minecraft revolutionizes, and then Fortnite does its own thing. They all build upon each other, and they're constantly becoming more complex.
It's funny because, you know, when I kind of think of like some things kind of getting repeated and stuff.
Right.
I want to ask, like, how did you feel about like when like the chess meta came up for Twitch, that now chess is online, we can play anybody, and all of a sudden you got a ton of people playing chess and that's doing so much with it.
Chess is an insanely cool game. I mean, if you think about it, how many games do you know that are still popular and played today that don't have variables?
Mm-hmm.
There's very, very few. Almost, all situations have random drops, random loot, random anything.
Battle pass.
But this is all, I do one move and Gary Kasparov says, you know what? I have a strategy for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think, really a big deal, because inevitably, the game survives the test of time, right? It has an ability to still draw players and viewers.
Yeah.
How is that possible, right? It's like this game is older than anybody. So I think so there's a difference between the game and the medium, right? The medium is Twitch, right?
Yeah.
So you're communicating out there in this wonderful, kind of new channel of communication. But at the same time, you have this traditional old thing, right?
Yes. What is something that you have personally seen that, you used to rock with and kind of done a lot, that you kind of seen kind of resurface now as something that people kind of like, hey, you know what? Like, this is something cool. Like, this is something just crazy. And then it's like, but we all kind of did that.
There's a lot of stuff that comes back in discussions about people skills. And I would say you got mechanics, right? You got game mechanics, but ultimately games are created by people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how in the early part of the industry, there was a lot of abuse of people because they didn't know how to manage projects or business in an entertainment model that was totally new. So you burned people out, you didn't treat them with a certain level of respect, and you had all kinds of solutions that were not good for the business or the people involved.
Yeah.
And we're circling back to, wouldn't it be great if we could really manage this effectively? Quality of life. Can we have systems in place where people are being taken care of? So today, I'm still hearing talk and discussions about try to make sure you have good relationships with the people on your team, recognize how to communicate with them, how mistakes in communication can ruin the relationship, how that can ruin business and leadership and all these things. I think we've always known this intuitively. Yeah. Like we intuitively know to be good to people.
Yeah.
But business sometimes gets in the way. But then mechanically, there's just too many things to mention.
In your opinion, do you feel that game development today is somewhat the same as the passion before, where people had to really start as a hobby, get people together, develop in a garage, and really need to collaborate in order to kind of complete their game? Or do you feel that with a lot of the technology and everything that's available for game development today, everybody starts at a higher level, which may lead to less collaboration?
I firmly believe that if you're a developer and you want to create something really valuable, some of the inspiration has to come from, like outer space or wherever you're getting your inspiration from. And you've got to be able to communicate that to other people because it requires a team. So if you have, in this case, a team of people that you can talk with and work with, then you can take those ideas and run with it and make something manifest in reality, create it. So I think you have to have the ability to kind of maybe paper prototype or pitch. Like one of the most brilliant things I ever saw was at Pixar, there was an animator who was acting in front of everybody else. And he was gesturing how the animation of the character should go. And I thought to myself, that's brilliant. This guy, he's going to try to do it on a computer. And it's like the old school computers, but he's acting in a theater showing how the character is going to act, and all these other engineers are figuring out how they're going to make it happen. To me, you can come up with a brilliant thing, but you've got to be able to work with other people to communicate that and make it happen. And I think collaboration is great. If you could do it all yourself and do it on a machine and somehow AI is able to assist and you have magical powers, power to you, man. You'd be like the greatest multi-talented dev in a long time. But reality is, if you can leverage more than 2 people, you're going to lift, more. 3 people is going to lift even more. And you start getting a team together, they're going to be able to move mountains. You need to have some of that support.
Well, I actually kind of really appreciate it. I felt like that was kind of a real insightful answer. And it kind of comes down to these kind of last few things, You've kind of done a lot. You've done the game development. You've, played games with your kids. You try to find even some time for you to play games with yourself. For a lot of people that just have a hard time, trying to game in any capacity because life just happens.
Yeah.
What's your kind of advice for people like that who at least want to have gaming itself a part of their life?
Right. Well, there's all these different trends in gaming, and one of the ones that I always thought was interesting was casual gaming, because there's long arcs. Like you get into a game and there's a quest and it's going to take you 15 minutes or an hour. You have to group up to people, coordinate. You have to invite your friends over from Monopoly. Monopoly's going to happen. That's going to take 10 hours. You know what I mean? Yeah. You try to get your buddies together to do something, and then you want to play single player, and the single player game could be a forever game, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these different lengths of, it's an interactive story with a resolution kind of thing. And if you have a game that's a shorter arc, they used to call them casual. You could do something for a little bit, put it down and play it and put it down. That's where I'm at these days. I need to have, because I've got other things happening, I want to have a game where I can pick it up, play it, and put it down. If you get into a multiplayer game and you jump in, you start doing something and you bail, people are going to be angry.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to pick the kind of games or the genres or the systems, whatever the game system it is, that fits your time commitment, and really be, aware of your own limits, which I'm trying to embody, because we all want to do great things, but there's a practical limit to what you can do. So I like the idea of having a game you can jump into and jump out of. And sometimes those aren't multiplayer games. Sometimes those are single player.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up our conversation today, just kind of like similar. While people are trying to find ways to kind of, game today, what about for the game developers? What do you think is the most important thing a lot of people who want to get into game development, whether they're younger or maybe like, my age, I'm 35.
Sure.
And I'm like, you know what? I think I could do a game. I think I could really jump in.
Right.
What's kind of your advice for people like that? Or, what do they need in order to kind of push them ahead?
That's interesting. I still firmly believe that if you have talent, you need to know what your talent is. Everybody has problems figuring out what their gifts are or what their weaknesses are. Sometimes there's a little self-delusion. Like you might think you're better at what because you're young.
Yeah.
You don't want to bring people down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is a certain reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I always say, find people who complement your skills, find people you can work together with. Cooperation is free to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
And if you're really good at one thing, find someone who's good at the thing that you're not good at and work with them and make it kind of a whole team. Three Musketeers is way better than one dude.
So definitely pretty much find your niche. Kind of get into it and see where you're missing.
I always feel that if you have passion for a particular discipline in game development, and maybe that's story, maybe that's art, maybe that's programming and technology, maybe that's the business, kind of more where I'm at. You take that, you chase that. Now, granted, I love all those things, but you take that, you chase that, you make that black belt kung fu as strong as you can, and then you'll pick up some other skills along the way so that you could help others when they need help. And then that will help you get as much, because you're going to need to do it in the dark unpaid. You're going to need to be able to do it at night when you're tired. You're going to need to be able to get up in the morning and say, I just had a brilliant idea and I wrote it down.
Yeah.
I'm going to pursue this idea now.
I think the writing down, I think is probably one of the most important things, because you always going to want to say, let me pause myself real quick. I think I know I'm going to forget. I know where those limits are.
I talk to people all the time, and it's like, that was really great. When I was meeting with people years ago, I used to write down things all the time, and I still get those aha moments. And what we do these days, we just take a picture with our phone.
That's been pretty nice around here.
Yeah.
Tim,
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds to say whatever you want in case you want to kind of shout out anything.
Sure. So I'm involved with lots of stuff, done a lot of things, but I would say there's a lot of people on LinkedIn who are always looking for opportunities to collaborate and work. My name's Tim Innes. Look me up on LinkedIn, say hello. And beyond that, try to find the things that motivate you, get you out of bed, drive passion, create the greatest dreams in your mind, and write them down. Find people who believe in it, organize a group, and start working towards figuring out how to make that happen, because you can do it. It's happened before.
Thank you again.
Yeah.